Hi guys, how are you? Welcome back to the channel. Are you enjoying spending the whole week with me? I'm honestly loving it. And what I like most is reading the comments and getting your opinion on the cases I tell. Believe me, I spend hours doing this and today's case is certainly crucial. Your opinion will be crucial because I know that you will want to have your say when you know the details of this case. Just so you are aware, this case involves an abusive relationship, a blood pact, and even a double murder. So I hope you're prepared for all these twists and turns, and now let's move on to today's case. First of all, I need to give you a warning. This video has a documentary nature and was produced using information available on the internet and compiled into a video. The intention of this documentary is not to shock anyone, much less to disrespect the people involved in the case. Kelly Cochran was born on June 5, 1982, making her a Gemini. She was born and raised in the city of Robert, which is located in the U.S. state of Indiana, daughter of a couple named Tim and Melanie. Kelly also had two younger brothers, that is, she was the couple's eldest daughter, who since she was little was a very problematic girl. She was rebellious, did not obey her parents, mistreated her younger brothers, and at school all the teachers and directors of the institution said that the girl was extremely manipulative and had a kind of evil smile on her face. Some teachers were even afraid of the girl and celebrated when she missed classes. When she reached adolescence, things only got worse. The girl became even more rebellious and was now aggressive towards her parents. The girl's father also said that she was born with evil incarnate, and people close to the family said that this statement was not an exaggeration by her father because the girl was really debauched and very malicious. There was even an episode where she was suspended from school for punching a boy in the face. So you see, people, even the boys, were afraid of her. Another situation that happened quite frequently was the girl's escapes. She was always running away from home and spent days away. Sometimes she came back on her own, but other times her mother and father had to look for the girl and almost always found her sleeping on the streets. And we're talking about a teenage girl. She was around 15 to 16 years old and was already rebellious in that way. It was at this time that the young woman discovered the world of alcohol and drugs, and I don't even need to tell you that from then on it was all downhill. She started stealing money from her parents to support her addiction, and when she didn't find money in their wallets, she sold goods from her home to buy alcohol and drugs. The girl was always high and thought it was great, even when she was scolded by her parents. That girl's parents were true angels and wanted to help their daughter at any cost. They always talked to her and tried to guide the young woman on the path she was taking. It wasn't right, and it would cause a lot of problems for her in the future. They even offered to pay for Kelly to go to a rehabilitation clinic, but she didn't want it at all. She felt great the way she was and always said that her parents were straight and that she was cool, detached from reality. People, if you're honest, I don't know how these parents had so much patience. I wouldn't have tolerated it. I would have already forcibly hospitalized her. But Kelly's parents held on, at least until she turned 18. They insisted on trying to help her. On the young woman's 18th birthday, the ultimatum came. Her parents took her aside and said, "Either you change your behavior or you will no longer be welcome in this house." Of course, Kelly cried and said she would change, but her behavior only improved in the first week after the conversation with her parents, and then it went back to being the same as it was, or even worse. In fact, it was exactly at this moment that the young woman's mother asked her to leave the family home. Later, Melanie said that it was very difficult to get her daughter out, but that at that moment she needed to think about her younger children who were exposed to unbelievably bad behavior from their older sister. As soon as she left her parents' house, she enrolled in college and graduated with honors in psychology and sociology, with a forensic specialization. Look, I need to tell you that although all of the young girl's teachers complained about her behavior, they all praised her intelligence. She did have it. An autodidact, she was extremely self-taught and was always ahead of her class. Kelly's mother found out about her high performance at college and imagined that her daughter had finally found a direction in her life. As Melanie was a great mother, very attached to her children, she invited Kelly to return to live with the family. After all, a brilliant daughter in college could be a great example for her younger siblings, but at that point Kelly was already dating and told her mother that the condition for her to return home would be if her boyfriend went with her. Kelly's boyfriend was called Jason Cochran, and he was 4 years older than her. It turns out that Melanie kind of knew Jason because he and his family had always been neighbors with Kelly's family. So Melanie had known the man since he was a child, and as she really wanted her daughter to come home, she ended up accepting that Jason would live with them. This ended up not working out very well because Jason and Kelly fought a lot. And although Melanie realized that her daughter manipulated her son-in-law a lot, she also found the man very loose and to a certain extent violent, which caused the woman to take a huge fight with the man. She even tried to warn her daughter that this guy was not a good person, but Kelly always responded harshly to her mother and said that she minded her own business. This relationship continued, and on September 14th, 2002, the couple, Kelly and Jason, got married. The wedding was quite normal. There was a ceremony in the church where they exchanged their vows, and after that, a small party just for those closest to them. But that night, something very bizarre happened. As soon as the party ended and the couple began their wedding night, they decided to do a blood pact. In the ritual of this pact, they made a loyalty agreement. If betrayal happened in that marriage, the person who betrayed would have to take the life of their lover. After the wedding, they moved from Kelly's parents' house to their own house, and the two were very happy for a long time. They opened their own pool maintenance business, and the family was really thriving. She seemed extremely in love with Jason, and vice versa. It was also true the two were always traveling together. They had a lot of friends, and everyone said they were a very fun and happy couple. But time passed and Jason developed a deep depression, and this greatly affected their marriage. Kelly didn't understand her husband's illness and always provoked him, and this certainly affected the man's mental health even more, which was already quite compromised. The relationship, which until then was beautiful, happy, and fun, became ugly, abusive, and toxic, and from then on, it was just downhill. There was even an episode where Jason was injured while maintaining a client's pool and ended up injuring his column. Kelly even told her husband that if he was going to stay invalid, it was better to die soon because she didn't feel like taking care of anyone. Now just imagine a person with depression hearing this kind of thing from their own wife. I think that more than being cruel, this can even be dangerous. Anyway, Jason managed to recover, but he suffered damage to his sciatic nerve, and because of that, he felt frequent pain and couldn't walk properly and clearly couldn't work anymore. The worst of all was that the man could no longer perform as well in bed, and that was death for her. She even told Jason several times that he was no longer a man and that he couldn't afford to pay for the house. He also couldn't even satisfy his wife, as you can imagine. Their financial situation was also deteriorating, and Jason had taken on several debts to try to keep the situation in that house stable. But by then, everything was out of control. It was a chaotic situation. Even with all this, the two didn't break up, and their relationship was literally between slaps and kisses. There was a time when Jason even threatened Kelly with a gun, but it was unloaded, and when Kelly noticed, she picked up the fish that she was cleaning for dinner and threw it at the good man's head. The couple realized that the way things were, they couldn't stay. They had also incurred a lot of debt in the city and were trying to start over. Away from all this, they decided to move to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. As soon as they settled in the new city, Kelly had to get several jobs to keep the house, considering that Jason was unable to work. She even liked having her husband at home at her disposal, and especially liked being able to throw things in the poor guy's face. As we know, Jason's performance in bed was something that really bothered Kelly, and because of that, she ended up taking a lover, and it is exactly at this moment that we are going to introduce another person into this story. Chris Regan was a well-settled and happy 50-year-old man. He was married for about 27 years, and from this marriage resulted in the only 2 children the man had after the divorce. Chris started dating a woman who was an old childhood friend, but it didn't work out very well, and he ended the relationship. His paths crossed with Kelly's, and the two began a logical romantic relationship that initially their relationship was a big secret, especially because Kelly was married to Jason, and he didn't even suspect that his wife was cheating on him. But after a while, things started to get more and more serious between Kelly and Chris, and they were truly falling in love, which meant that the couple no longer cared about hiding their relationship. It didn't take long for Jason to find out about the affair that his wife was having with Chris, but in truth, although he was very upset, he already expected this to happen because, as we already know, he could no longer give what Kelly wanted. So he knew that sooner or later she would find a lover, but this triggered an even deeper depression in the man, and he spoke openly to her about his feelings. But she didn't care. The truth is that she was happy with Chris and was already sure that he was the one she wanted to be with. Unfortunately for Kelly, the opposite wasn't true. Chris hadn't jumped into this relationship, and in fact he was looking for a fresh start in his life, so much so that he got a job in North Carolina and was ready to move, which obviously shocked her. She couldn't believe that Chris was doing that to her. It was during this time that the couple spoke again about the blood pact, which they had made during their honeymoon, and came to the conclusion that for it to work, Chris Reagan had to die well. If you remember this pact well, it said that whoever cheated would have to kill their own lover, so going by the rules, Kelly would have to commit the crime. But she didn't really feel like it, so she tried to convince Jason to do the dirty work for her. The plan was as follows. Kelly would lure Chris to her house. Once there, the two would have intimate relations, and during the act, Jason would appear and shoot Chris. I don't know how this would fix their marriage, but anyway, everyone is crazy with their own quirks. On October 14, 2014, Kelly sent a text message to Chris, inviting him to have dinner with her at her home. She said it would be a farewell meeting, and that she was already missing her intimate encounters. Chris accepted the invitation. After all, he thought it really was just one last date, and he had no idea what Kelly and her husband Jason were planning for that night. Chris arrived at Kelly's house late in the afternoon around 4:30. He parked his car in front of the house and entered. As soon as he walked through the door, Kelly already grabbed the man and started kissing him madly, directing him to the bedroom. The two took off their clothes and began to have intimate relations, and it was at that moment that Jason entered the room and shot Chris in the back of the head. Kelly was underneath the man, so he was hit by the shot. His body fell lifeless on top of the woman in a very bizarre way. She started laughing at the situation as if she was having fun. Even now, as if all of this wasn't bizarre enough, Jason took Chris's body off Kelly, and the two even had intimate relations next to the lifeless body of Kelly's lover. And it's worth remembering that it had been a long time since the two had been able to sleep together. But after that episode, Jason managed to recover his performance in bed, and they had a lot of fun and relief. As soon as they finished with all that bizarreness, she said to Jason that she would use her studies in forensic psychology to free them from this crime. She then began to strategically clean the entire place so that no trace of that murder would remain. After that, they took Chris's body down to the basement of the residence, and Jason went to his neighbor and asked to borrow an electric saw. He did this at Kelly's behest, as she said if they bought this tool, it could be a suspicious act. So while Jason spent the entire afternoon in the basement, slicing the body into small parts, Kelly took the man's car that was parked in front of her house and drove to a local park. Once there, she cleaned up all her tracks and abandoned the vehicle. The next day, Jason built a fire and burned something neighbors reported that looked like some kind of meat. They even thought that Jason was trying to have a barbecue, but that it wasn't working very well. To prove that he was a good barbecue chef, Jason and Kelly invited some of their neighbors over for a barbecue. The neighbors were surprised because they weren't a very sociable couple, but they also wouldn't turn down free food. So everyone who was invited attended. The people who were at this barbecue said that there was a lot of meat, there were hamburgers and sausages of the most varied types, and people even thought that maybe the couple had won a lottery prize because that barbecue would certainly be very expensive. People also said that the flavor of the meat was strange, but Jason explained that it was an exotic meat from South America. He told the guests that he had worked as a butcher for a long time, and that after learning about this type of meat, he wouldn't buy any other. I don't think I need to tell you what meat they were serving at the barbecue. For me, the most bizarre thing about all of this is that these people who were eating had nothing to do with the story and were stuck in the middle of this mess. Imagine how these people remained afterwards when they discovered what they were eating. 2 weeks later, Chris was reported missing, and after investigating a little, the officers discovered that he was having an affair with Kelly. So it didn't take long for investigators to knock on the woman's door. She was taken for interrogation, and the contradictions she entered were very amateurish for someone with the study she had, and the officers are smart and quickly realized that she had something to do with the man's disappearance. They just needed to prove it first before requesting preventive detention. Unfortunately, the investigations moved very slowly after some time. They even had some evidence against Kelly, such as the triangulation of mobile networks that indicated that the last place Chris had been was Kelly's house, and also the testimony of some neighbors who told about the loan of the electric saw and also about the barbecue with supposed exotic meat from South America. Although investigators now had circumstantial evidence to conduct at least one new interrogation, at that point Kelly and Jason had already fled the city and returned to their home state. 16 months have passed since Chris's death, and the investigations were still very slow until FBI entered this story. But unfortunately, as the couple had moved out of state and with all the bureaucracy, the deal didn't go through at all. And meanwhile, Kelly was there celebrating, thinking that she had made a perfect plan, and that her forensic studies had saved her. The strangest thing about all this is that Kelly was very superb, so she kept in touch with the investigators on the case all the time. She even notified them that she would move out of state because she knew they couldn't stop it and was completely sure about the effectiveness of her plan. In February 2016, one of the investigators who was talking to Kelly told her that she could even be smart and hold on to this thing, but Jason would burst at any moment and would certainly ruin everything. After this conversation, she had a moment and realized that her husband was really emotionally shaken and that he could explode at any moment and tell everything to the police. So she decided she needed to get rid of him once and for all. She was so arrogant that she imagined she would get away with one murder with the FBI on her tail. She really thought she was smarter than everyone and that she would get away with it once again. Then, that same week, she injected Jason with a super high dose of heroin and then suffocated him with a pillow. The next morning, she called 911 and said she had just woken up and her husband was dead. The woman's idea was for everyone to believe that he had an overdose. But as she was already in the federal sights, rescuers ended up calling the authorities to investigate Jason's death. The autopsy was able to prove that Jason had actually died from mechanical asphyxiation, and there were even marks on his neck. So the investigators had everything they needed to arrest Kelly immediately for her husband's death, but they preferred to rope her in to get evidence of Chris's death. The officer told her that Jason had written a letter before he died, confessing everything about Chris's death. This information left her in panic, and because of that, she confessed that she knew about Chris's murder, but denied her involvement and said that Jason had done everything alone. She even gave enough information for investigators to find some parts of Chris's body. Although they found very few parts because we know very well what the fate of most of the man's body was, so they only found a few pieces and Chris's head, but that was enough for them to formally accuse Kelly. Kelly was arrested preventively, and her trial began on February 14, 2017. She was being accused of the murder of Chris and also Jason, and to these two charges she pleaded not guilty. After the prosecution presented all the evidence they had, the jury deliberated and returned a guilty verdict for the murder of Chris Reagan, and for that, Kelly received a life sentence. When she realized there was no escape, the woman decided to make a deal with the prosecutor for the murder of her husband Jason, and as a result, she ended up being sentenced to 65 years in prison. After this agreement, Kelly decided to open her mouth and confessed everything in detail. This is why we know how this story unfolds. Bizarre, and if you think it's over, I'm sorry to say you are very mistaken, because right after the conviction, Kelly's brother went to the investigators and said that he believed that his sister had committed many other crimes, and he was almost certain that she was responsible for at least 9 deaths all over the United States. The investigators then went to talk to Kelly, and she confessed. She said that she had actually already claimed victims in several states, such as Indiana, Michigan, and Minnesota. She confessed all of this because in the agreement she made with the prosecutor regarding the murder of her husband Jason, there was a clause that she could never be charged with another murder again. In other words, it was kind of an immunity for her, and she said to the investigators, "Yes, I killed more people and you can't do anything, but I did." Investigators then asked for more information, and she did not reveal where the other bodies were, or even the identities of the victims. But this revelation caused investigators to reopen some cases, and there were really strong indications that she had victimized other people and got away with these crimes. Even if she wants to, she can take and show the investigators where these other victims are, their bodies, because of that agreement, she is immune to answering for any other murder, which I find bizarre. But deep down, I thought this woman was brilliant because look, she managed to circumvent American justice, even though it's something very difficult, so she's really very intelligent. It's a shame she didn't use all that potential for good. But that's it, folks. I know this case leaves us all confused because there is a lot of information, but I want to know your opinion about it here in the comments. And that was the case today. A kiss for all of you, and see you in the next video.